Hey, it's Trey here, and you're listening to Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. There's this thing on Facebook, you've probably seen it, where you can snooze someone for 30 days. You snooze someone when you want to take a little break from their digital updates. Maybe it's a old college roommate who's posted too many baby pics, or it's that ex-coworker who's uploaded too many perky vacation videos. Click snooze, and you get a little break. They'll be back in a month. But on Facebook, still the most popular social media platform, you can go deeper and meaner. You can unfriend. You can cut off your digital lifeline with a person. And today, that pretty much means not knowing anything about what's going on in their life with a click of a single button. Click. Bye-bye. After Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016, lots of people did just that. Purged their political enemies from their social media feed. Suddenly, everybody was Joseph McCarthy. Click. Goodbye. Republicans unfriended Democrats. Democrats unfriended Republicans. But one man in Ohio did just the opposite.
Welcome to my little wonderland.
Well,
You've got postal workers downstairs, you got the transit union workers up here, and you got the AFL-CIO right here.
Okay. I feel union-y.
You do, and you look union-y.
That's Brian Griffin. We've known each other for a long time.
You look good, man.
Thank you.
Look like Trey K.
Yeah, hold on a second.
As opposed to some of us old fat boys that didn't retain that youthful nature.
Well, I swim a lot. That helps. Once I got my microphone and recorder set up, I asked Brian to introduce himself.
My name is Brian Griffin. I am the Executive Secretary-Treasurer for the Cincinnati AFL-CIO Labor Council. My friend Trey K, he asked if I would talk to him, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for him.
Tell my audience how we know each other.
Wow. Not all of it. I went to Ohio University in 1978, and somewhere around 79, I believe, a young man from Charleston, West Virginia showed up, and he was as unique as I'd ever met.
Oh, shucks.
That's how I got to know Trey, and we've been fast and furious brothers ever since.
Brian is a big city guy now, but he wasn't always. He grew up a couple of hours east of here.
I grew up in a small town, mostly in a small town of Gallipolis, Ohio, my mama's hometown. My mama and my papa met during World War II when they were both in the Navy. And he was a Midtown Hell's Kitchen boy from New York City. They met there and ultimately, long story shorter, got married, had 14 children, and they settled in my mom's hometown, which is Gallipolis, Ohio.
To somebody who is from any other place in America, how would you describe Gallipolis, Ohio?
I was raised that if you're driving down the street and a funeral goes by, you pull over and you stop and nobody says a word until that funeral is by. If you are walking on the street, you stop, you turn to the street, you take your hat off, and you wait for that individual to go by. You probably knew them. They were probably somebody who was somebody to your family. This is a place where every other mother was my mother, and every other father was my father, and the rules, the discipline, the yellow lines on the road that I walked were put down there by my community. And that's what it was. It was a heavily bonding, very nurturing, but don't mess up kind of community.
Brian says it was also a place where people agreed to disagree. And that's the focus of this episode of Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide us. I'm Trey K, and our show comes to you from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX. Now back to my friend Brian.
I was born and raised by an East Coast liberal. And we were very, very much considered the lefties, the progressives. And yet, my father was one of the crowd. there was room for debate, for discussion, for healthy discussions amongst people who were friends, who would go to cocktail parties together, and they would argue loud and vociferously all the way into the deep morning hours. And the next day they would get up and they would go to work, and they'd be the best of friends because that's what they were. They were friends.
About 3,500 people live in Gallipolis, Ohio. People here vote Republican. 3 years ago, 77% of the voters in Gallia County, that's where Gallipolis is, cast a ballot for Donald Trump. Back in 2016, 75% of the people here voted for Trump, helping lift him to the White House. On election night, 2016, Brian lost a lot of sleep.
Okay, I'm one of those people that stays awake all night on election night.
There is a crack in the blue wall.
Today we're going to win the great state of Michigan, and we are going to win back the White House.
What's going on in Michigan? Is Hillary Clinton going to be able to pull it out? It sounds like it's really tight.
So I knew when the Michigan firewall fell that it was over, and that our president was Donald Trump. And there was never a more transformational moment in my entire life, because not only was it that my candidate was not going to win, but the most unexpected thing that every wonk was talking about didn't happen.
Trump won. It unnerved Brian.
That was completely disorienting.
However, Brian didn't yell or scream. He didn't unfriend his conservative friends in Gallipolis. Instead, he listened.
I've had friends that I had all my life. We grew up together. The views that they have are the views they formed while we were all growing up and forming our views. I know where they're coming from.
They're from a place where things haven't been going well for a long time.
We were left out. We did get a rust belt wrapped around us. During our lifetime, we watched small, affluent towns all around us, including ours, go from vibrant communities that had their own businesses and their own restaurants and their own social fabric and their own, faith community, go to bombed out wastelands.
Okay, I'm Lynn Angel, born and raised in Gallia County, Ohio, southeastern Ohio, Appalachia. I'm a girl that's going to call a road, not a street.
Lynn is one of Brian's closest friends. She still lives in Gallipolis. It's about 150 miles from Brian's home in Cincinnati. These days, they mostly connect on FaceTime or over the phone. I met up with Lynn in downtown Gallipolis.
We are very, very conservative. Every office holder in the county courthouse is a Republican. We are Mayberry, except we're not quite as idyllic. We have our drug problems. We have our theft problems. Back when tobacco existed, we had a much more vibrant farming community. Now that that's gone, there's a lot of us finding our way into something else to make our farms profitable. We're not the people that have the 500-acre soybean fields up north. We're the people that have the 30-acre field and the smaller tractors. It's just Appalachia.
Lynn is a CPA and owner of Angel Accounting. She has a bunch of people working for her here and in 2 other offices in neighboring towns. The accounting firm has about 250 business clients, and it completes more than 3,000 tax returns every year. Despite being the boss here, Lynn doesn't put on airs. In fact, as we talked, she wasn't wearing shoes.
Usually you'll find me in jeans. My shoes are downstairs by my desk. It's just we're comfortable here. When I go home tonight, I'm going to go to the barn before I go to the house. So I've got to feed sheep and everything before I hit. So I come dressed to go to the barn later and go from there.
So there's work. There's raising 50 head of sheep at her place outside of town. But there's a lot more that keeps her busy.
busy in the community. I'm a school board member. I'm got Republican Central Committee, Executive Committee member, help with a couple of nonprofits, and just try to do what I can to be here.
What do you like to do when you're not working?
We farm. We shoot guns. I read a lot. I think that helps with maybe making me a little bit better worldview than if I just watch television. The old skills, we sew, we can. We've got a garden. I prep. I'm a prepper.
That often, that you're a doomsday prepper. I mean, that's the term that's often used.
I don't know that I'm the doomsday prepper, but last year when there was a formula shortage, I had a new grandchild on the way. I found an antidote. I would like to have enough electricity hooked into my solar, then I can run my freezer and my refrigerator and be self-sufficient. I'm not somebody that would say I want to go off the grid, but at the same time, I like to be where I don't need anybody.
As Lynn mentioned, she's on the local school board, a role she served in for almost 30 years. She's been president and vice president. In 2018, she received the Ohio School Board Veteran Board Member Award, which led me to ask her how folks in big cities think about folks in small towns. Do you feel like you're a part of Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati?
I don't think the cities understand us. I've been to school board conventions, and the cities want X, the rural districts want Y. With the Ohio School Board Association, one district, one vote. There's 660 districts in Ohio, most of which are rural, and we finally just agreed to disagree at some points on platforms to be presented to the legislature because we live in different worlds, and we both see our world as contradictory to the other world. We have the same problems, lack of funding, not being able to find teachers, etc. But if you fix it for the city, it messes the rural areas up. You fix the rural areas, it messes the cities up, and we can't find that we can find something that would fix everybody.
Lynn might not click with school board members in big cities, but she sure does click with Brian. I asked Lynn and Brian to describe each other.
In high school, I knew Brian Griffin. Brian was in the music group.
My life was all around showing up, hitting my marks, remembering my words, and delivering.
They were a little fancier than we were. They dressed nicer. They went when they went to a competition. They were all cleaned up with and had their hair combed and suits and ties.
She was more in kind of like Future Farmers of America and agriculture, and she ended up being an incredible accountant with her own firm. She was always excellent with the numbers and had a very, very practical mind. But the crowds we ran with were different in the sense that a little bit more of the, down home country versus the aspiring, I want to go sing opera and be in theater.
I was in FFA, VOAG. We were the farm kids. We went to a competition. We had boots on, jeans, and we're digging in the dirt or judging dairy, judging meat.
I can't even begin to tell you how I know her other than we've known each other forever. High school, junior high, grade school, probably, play dates.
After a break, we'll hear how Lynn and Brian remain friends despite their political differences. And we'll find out what happened when Brian introduced one of his anti-gun liberal friends to Lynn, a woman who likes to shoot just for the fun of it.
If there's a coyote in the field killing my sheep, I can't kick it off. If there's a bobcat in my chicken house, I can't run it out the door.
So he wanted to know why you have an AR.
Because it's fun. It's a toy.
You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Hey, Trey here, and you're listening to Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Let's return to Brian Griffin, Lynn Angel, and their quest to understand each other better. But before we do that, I've asked each of them to talk a little bit about their politics. We'll start with Lynn.
I'm a fairly conservative Republican. There's some libertarian in my family, and I do have some libertarian leanings in that I don't like to see the government controlling everything. I think our society, we have capitalists, we have socialists, we have entrepreneurs, we have workers. We as a population are diverse enough, we can have a very productive society if you leave us alone. We don't need over-government.
And now, Brian.
The easiest answer is I'm a fairly progressive. I avoid the liberal word because it's been so badly used, but progressive is getting its own baggage these days. But I might be to the point where, if you go so far east, you're west. And if you go so far west, you're east. And in my progressiveness, I see an awful lot of things in what a lot of people would see as a conservative perspective. And when we divide ourselves so much into various different groups and interests and classes and all of those things, we miss the point that we're all just people.
True, but some people just don't want to listen to what other people have to say. When I met Brian at the Cincinnati Union Hall, we got to talking about a friend of ours from college who went nuclear on his Facebook friends who didn't vote for the candidate he voted for. Brian wasn't down for that.
That reaction doesn't get us anywhere. It perpetuates the issue that's mostly compounding the problem in our country right now. And that is we won't talk to each other. We won't look each other in the eye and respectfully say, I hear you, I feel where you're coming from, but this is what I see, this is what I feel, this is what I think. And to actually understand, you cannot possibly change a mind unless you understand why it's where it is.
Instead of saying, I'm going to vote everybody who supported Trump off the island and cancel them from my life, you decided to maybe reach back to somebody who has a worldview different than yours, pulled the lever for Donald Trump, and that for you to kind of reestablish your personal equilibrium, you thought that the answer would be to go and connect with her and
find out why. Remember how I described the people in Gallipolis, Ohio? The people in Gallipolis, Ohio are loving. They'll give you the shirt off their back, but they're going to want to know who you are, and they're going to want to know that you're playing straight. If you're fooling them, they're going to figure it out quick. This is the part of the state where you have to go and know how to pronounce certain villages by the alternate pronunciation, because if you call them by what they're obviously called, they know you're outside. They know you don't know how to say that word here.
Well, it's funny, because I said to Lynn, okay, do I call this place Gallipolis or Gallipolis?
It's Gallipolis.
You start this initiative, instead of canceling everybody from your life who is supporting Donald Trump and Republicans, etc., you actually reach out. You have some friends who identify as progressive and liberal in their politics, and they're saying to you, I don't understand somebody who would vote for Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, I don't understand somebody who would support the NRA, the National Rifle Association. I don't understand why somebody would want to have an AR-15. And you're having a conversation with somebody like that, and you say, well, if you want to talk to somebody, you might want to talk to my friend Lynn. Do you remember doing what? Do you remember doing that?
Yeah, I actually do, but I would tell you that you're a boy from Charleston. When you were growing up, the NRA was not the enemy. I mean, we had school functions. We had scout functions. We had all these different wonderful things that were educational, that were actually training young people to be respectful and to know how to use a weapon and what to use certain weapons for, specifically with regard to an agrarian community where we got a certain day off every year for deer season opening. It was a holiday. That's where that comes from. Now, did that get bastardized? Did that get changed? I say yes. That is no longer the purpose of the NRA, and that's my problem with the NRA. But I grew up as a friend of the NRA. I grew up absolutely learning my guns and learning how to shoot, and I went hunting, and I did all the things that people did in my hometown.
Lynn still does those things. She shoots guns for fun, and she has guns for protection. That brings us to the conversation Lynn had with one of Brian's liberal friends. The conversation, which happened on Facebook Messenger, involved Brian, Lynn, and this liberal friend. The liberal friend just couldn't understand why anyone needed a gun, much less an AR-15. This is what Lynn told that liberal friend.
At my desk downstairs, there's a gun. You're coming here at 8 o'clock at night and I'm by myself. I will be protected. In my pickup, there's one at my ankle. When I pull in the house at night and I'm going to the barn in the dark by myself with a couple of dogs with me, I want to know I can get a hold of something if somebody's out there. I live in rural southeastern Ohio. If there's a coyote killing my sheep, I'm going to pull a rifle out.
But he wanted to know why you have an AR.
Because it's fun. It's a toy. It really is. Why does he have a jet ski? Why do you have a...
Did he say something like, well, I have a jet ski, but it probably is not couldn't potentially mow people down and kill them?
Well, my AR is not either. It's locked up in a safe at the house.
During the conversation, Lynn learned about the liberal friend's love of fast cars. He owns 3 Jaguars.
Well, why do you have 3 Jaguars? And the guy's like, well, they're fun. Okay. You just drive them. Oh, no, we go fast in them. It's like, well, that's dangerous. You could kill somebody going fast in your Jaguar. It's illegal. At least my gun's legal. Before we got done, we agreed that we did not quite agree with each other.
I could see a different scenario. It'd be like, Brian, we are high school classmates. We plan reunions and stuff like that. Why do you have these people from other parts of the world who have political views? Why are you stirring the pot? Why do you have me talking to these people? I could see a scenario where you would be annoyed by that.
No, Brian and I think it's fun. we as long as nobody's getting angry, that's the kind of discussion that would help heal this country up, that would help fix the country, is me being able to explain to, and I think the gentleman I talked to now he may not go out and buy a gun, but he at least understands why I have it. I'm not going to hurt anybody with it unless you're breaking into my house, but he now understands.
Do you understand anything about him?
Yes. I don't think he was raised around guns. I don't think he's had the experience with them and doesn't want it. But just because you haven't had an experience with something or you don't understand it doesn't mean it's automatically bad.
How does your ongoing friendship with Brian Griffin help you understand other points of view, even when you don't agree with them?
Because I get to hear the other side. I get to ask questions when I don't understand what he said. I get to call back and say, you said this, but I thought of this. And he's the same way. I get to call him if something doesn't make sense in what he's saying. We get to exchange thoughts. We're not going to agree all the time. We're never going to agree on some things, but at least we know where the other one's coming from without saying, you're just wrong.
At this point, I just needed to know what Brian thought. So we called him.
What am I doing here? Why you got me on here with this, redneck country girl that I knew all these years ago? I mean, we city-dwelling folk don't want to hang with these, rural creatures anymore, so.
But you're going to come to my class reunion this fall.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Jeez, I hadn't even had a chance to ask a question, and they were already joking around. So how frequently are you two in touch?
I have to have my Lynn fix every now and then.
Yeah.
We've been friends a long damn time.
We're either got an issue we want to talk about, or he wants to sick me on one of his liberal friends for fun, or just catching up.
Here's the thing I hear a lot of from either side of the camp, that it's almost as if the world would be okay if the other side would go away. But if the other side would go away, Brian, Lynn wouldn't be there, or Lynn, Brian wouldn't be there. I mean, how do you see it?
We've agreed never to get mad at each other. We never get angry. We might not agree on something, but we never get angry, and it helps both of us to temper our view by hearing the other side.
But did you ever make a commitment? Like, did you say, look, let's just say we're never going to do that?
I've never even thought of doing that because, in my opinion, my views are informed by Lynn. Everything I think gets put up against the test of, why is she thinking? Why are they thinking what they're thinking?
The same goes for Lynn. When she's working with big city school board members on statewide issues, sometimes the urban-rural divide reminds her how much room there is between people on some issues.
We all agreed to disagree and didn't pass anything because Cleveland, Dayton, Cincinnati, and Columbus couldn't agree with the rest of the districts. So it just we nullified the whole assembly. But Brian's the one I can come to and say, hey, Cleveland wants to do this. Explain to me why that's important to the city. And then I can look at, this is why we don't like it in the rural area.
Brian, you've said that you you said you love President Biden's infrastructure spending and that it's affecting many union jobs. Is that something you'd call and talk to Lynn about?
Yeah, we've talked about that, I think. But I think the main reason I think about that is because that 60-70% that Lynn and I agree is actually in the middle.
Yep.
They're going to be ones out there on the roads putting down that pavement. They're going to be ones out on the bridges putting up the steel. It's working people. That 60% in the middle, that's where the working people live. And you know what? When you cut off the far left and you cut off the far right, you're actually looking at the folks that pay for this country.
The bulk of us are in the middle.
Absolutely.
And we may be tilted left or tilted right. And if it wasn't for the extreme screaming, I think we could adjust the different sides.
When it comes to President Biden's infrastructure plan, Lynn likes the idea of new roads and bridges. But some of the other stuff, she's not so sure about that.
I'm not real fond of wind farms, some of the EV things, but roads, bridges, 5G, internet services for the rural communities. No, you're not going to hear a word back from me on that.
But I wonder, Lynn, even there, isn't it really a matter of how we get there, not that we should get there? Because I think most of the fear that I run into is the pace of change really impacts working people. Because you've got a whole bunch of working people here over on what for this example, I'll call old infrastructure.
Right.
And then you've got a bunch of people over here that will be learning new trades and crafts in new infrastructure.
Yes.
So it's not so much that EVs are necessarily a bad thing. It's a matter of how are we going to get there, because we're displacing a lot of people on a lot of conventional work. And that becomes problematic, and that's the pain of change. And Trey, I think you know that, brother, as a man of the coal mining, state like West Virginia. It's uncomfortable when you talk about having to back off on coal, because in the long run, that's not future-proofed, that's not sustainable. But how quickly you go there is a huge political issue.
I have trouble with looking at the EV infrastructure because I'm not sure how I can get someplace with a load of cattle or livestock behind my truck if I need to charge my battery.
Right, and that's even a matter of timing and build out.
Yep.
We weren't in a situation where you could drive across the country and fill up your tank every few miles when we first started selling cars.
Right.
That infrastructure took some time, but none of us were there. One of the things that I think a lot of the progressive side of the argument is really bad at is, instead of just being smart and thinking everybody knows something, why don't we try to have a conversation about how it's going to take place?
Yes.
And if everybody's at the table talking about how it's going to take place, then they won't be so worried about what's going to take place.
Brian, Lynn likes to shoot her AR-15. What do you think of that?
I hope someday that she'll be ready to go out and let me try that bad boy out. I've shot a Mini 14 a few times and it was a lot of fun. They are fun. My problem is, and I don't believe this is because we have a mental health issue, which we do, and I don't believe this is just because we have weak gun laws, because we do, but we make so many exceptions to things. Like this kid recently, there were so many red flags down in Jacksonville around this guy.
Brian is referring to a white gunman who left racist writings and used racial slurs before killing 3 black people at a dollar store in Florida.
There should have been a lot of different ways to make sure that man got nowhere near an AR-15. We have removed most of the what I would consider to be logical safeguards around owning a weapon, and it makes things like that too prevalent because we become a society where instead of me and Lynn talking about stuff we disagree on, it's just easy to go out to my car and grab a weapon and come in and kill you. We don't have the safety nets that we had once around mental health. How do you mitigate circumstances where somebody is so off the hook with possibly mental illness and anger that we don't have the ability to stop them? So, I don't have any problem with her having that AR-15 because I know Lynn. But I got a real problem with them being easier to go and get than a fishing license.
Yes.
Lynn, I see you nodding your head there, and yet I know that in many ways there are people who would be from the conservative side who might have a problem with what Brian said.
I have no problem with what kind of gun you own or how many guns you own. I have trouble with your ability to own a gun. There are people in our community that I would say do not need a gun.
I had one more question for Brian and Lynn. What do you two disagree about? And what stops you cold?
What stops me cold is being disagreeable. I'm not going to be disagreeable because it does 2 things. It makes me at odds with my friend, who I love, and it stops the conversation. The only thing I think we would ever disagree on, which we would probably never get close to, would be some very fundamental opinions that have become pretty hardwired right now. But I really think even then, some of the conversation we've had here today, Trey, was very enlightening to me because, again, I hear my very reasonable, very conservative friend making sense from the right and not having hard and fast, heard it only on Fox kind of opinions.
We disagree about a lot of things, but
Can you be specific about some of them?
guns probably aren't quite on tip with abortion. We are on base with the quality of our last 3 presidents. We both have varying opinions of that. We're different sides of a coin, but it's still close enough to be the coin. Neither one of us are extreme. I do not believe that I could ever throw a topic at Brian that he would say, "You're an idiot, I never want to talk to you again."
It's reassuring and comforting to know that someplace in this divided country of ours, political opposites are still talking and listening. But you should also know, Lynn says she's never going to convince Brian to vote for Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. And she adds, there's no way she's ever voting for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this show was me, Trey Kay, Todd Melby, Matthew Hancock, and Kate Smith. Michael Lipton, Tristram Lozow, and Ahmed Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. Hey, we'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Share them with us on our Facebook page, or you could brave X, formerly known as Twitter, and tweet to us at UsThemPodcast. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.